How's it going, everyone, and welcome to another video. Today we'll be talking about RuneScape and how this simple point-and-click game completely changed my life for the better. But first, consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel. It helps out massively. Now, let's get into it. I'm going to break this video down into 3 sections. First, we'll go over my history with RuneScape, starting with when I first found out about the game, all the way until present day, 20 years later, as I return to the game after a hefty break. Then, we'll look at how I plan on playing RuneScape as I return to the game, trying to get as much nostalgic vibes out of the game as I can, as well as showing you the progress I have made so far. And finally, we'll go over all of the life lessons I've learned from RuneScape that have helped shape me into the person I am today. But with that all out of the way, let's get started with part 1. Part 1. My history with RuneScape. I turned 30 years old this year, and since I was a child, one of the constants in my life has been RuneScape. I remember being at school, and whenever we could, my friends and I would go on Miniclip and use their top 10 games feature to find fun games that we could all play together. We played it all, from Bubble Trouble, to Club Penguin, to Bang Howdy, but then one day, a new game took the top spot, RuneScape, and from the off, I was addicted. Back then, I didn't know how to look for guides online, so I had to figure everything out myself, or via asking people in the game, and the sheer amount of things you could do in the game had me in awe. My parents were never big into video games, so the first couple of years, I could only play for very short amounts of time at school. Or, if I went to the bar with my dad, I would convince him to give me some money to go spend an hour in the internet cafe next door to play RuneScape. They also didn't believe in spending money on gaming, so I was destined to be free to play in RuneScape for the first few years of my playtime, but there's still a lot of fun stuff to do in the game. I'm not gonna lie though, when I'd see members walking by in members only gear, I'd get a little jealous. But eventually, I managed to convince my parents to get a computer for the house, and their friends sold them an old second-hand desktop. It couldn't handle much, but it was just enough to play RuneScape on, and I was ecstatic. Still, my parents would limit my computer time to very minuscule amounts, which doesn't allow for much progression in RuneScape, but I had so much fun anytime I could get on the game. I vividly remember, whenever I was not playing, thinking about what I was going to do the next time I got on, and making plans on what I wanted to go for next. Me and my best friend would even draw our characters in what we thought was the most elite gear at the time, which looking back on, was far from it. My best friend would always be in gold-trimmed green dragon hide, and I'd have trimmed rune armor, with the dragon medium helmet on. We don't have access to all the videos and guides you'd see online nowadays, so for us, if we were to get that armor, we'd have beaten the game. But I would spend the next decade continuing on with the game, and as technology got better, I managed to get a laptop, and my playtime significantly began to improve as I got a bit older. I even managed to convince one of my friends to get his parents to pay for my membership, and I would pay him back with my allowance, since I didn't have a credit card. At this point, I had finally learned how to navigate the whole world, without having to ask people to show me where certain places were. I was learning to be efficient with my skill training, and I'd even gotten my first skill cape, in the woodcutting cape, which was a massive moment for me. Of course, over this period, I'd take little breaks here and there, but as the saying goes, you never quit RuneScape, you just take extended breaks. But then, everything changed, with the announcement of Evolution of Combat. On the 20th of November, 2012, they dropped their new, revamped combat system, in what was dubbed the Evolution of Combat, and the Jagex team broke the hearts of all the players who'd been in love with the game for ages. I tried to give this update a chance, because I put so many hours and work into my account, but the game just felt so different, and I was no longer enjoying it. It was at this point that I thought this might be the final break I take from RuneScape. However, Jagex saw the massive decline in numbers to the player base, and the outcry for the community, and less than a year later, on the 16th of February, 2013, released an old version of RuneScape, known as Old School RuneScape, which would be just like how the game was prior to the Evolution of Combat, to appease those of us who had given up on the game. I was so excited when I saw this news, but when I heard I couldn't revert my character that I had put so much work into back to an old school server, I decided I didn't want to start over from scratch. It wouldn't be long though before I flip-flopped on that decision, because several months later, the RuneScape bug bit me again.
Oh shit, here we go again.
And I decided it was time to come back and start again. I grinded my way back up, filled with joy and nostalgia, constantly getting reminders of my childhood as I hit certain milestones. Now being ultra efficient though, using wikis and video guides to train every skill in the most efficient way. It wasn't quite the same as before, but it still felt great to be back, and I was building my account into a beast. I was never a top tier player, or did the super endgame content, but I have over 121 days played on my new main account, and got it to pretty decent stats overall, with several 99s. Not to mention the 133 days on my RuneScape 3 account, and all the alts I made over the years as well. Over the next decade, I'd sink many more days into what was now referred to as Old School RuneScape, and I'd take many breaks as well, usually ranging from a couple months to a year, but I'd always come back. This last break, however, has been quite a significant one, as it's been over a couple of years, but the bug is back, and I decided it's time to return to RuneScape. Don't get me wrong, while I have been away, I still kept up with the content on YouTube, and not just the official announcements, but the series as well. And boy does RuneScape have some of the best content creators out there. Some of my favorite series that I've followed include Slayer Droplocked, McTile, and By Release, but there's just so many more that I can't list them all. But I wanted to try something new this time out, instead of just jumping on the main and getting to grinding. So I decided I'd come back as an Iron Man, since I've never played that mode before, and it sounds like a lot of fun. I also wanted to maximize nostalgia out of my experience, so instead of doing what I would usually have done and followed the efficiency guide for an Iron Man, I'm going to be going about it all in my own way, and training in the places I loved to train in the most as a kid, the places I have vivid memories of from back then. And that brings us to part 2. Part 2, reliving my childhood through RuneScape. So to start things off, I went ahead and created my new Iron Man, and ran my way through Tutorial Island in about 13 minutes. It appears as if the plugins I enabled from before I took my break were all still active, but nothing really bothered me, so I didn't play around with any of the settings. I may come back and do so later though, but for now I just wanted to start playing. Already the nostalgia was flooding back as I made my way across the island that I had completed so many times before as a child. Eventually though, I made it to the mainland, grabbed my gear from the Iron Man instructor, and got to killing some goblins. I wanted to get a few combat levels up to level 5 first, and then get 10 gold to head over to Al-Kharid, as this was probably the spot I spent the most of my time in as a child. For the first couple of days, I decided I wanted to stay free to play, as there was a lot of things I wanted to experience in these zones to begin with. But also, a big chunk of my childhood was spent as a free-to-play player, so it was only right to start things off this way. I remember back then, I'd kill cows and bank their hides, and this was my go-to method for making gold early on, which looking back on, wasn't very efficient, but it felt good to do so, as I was seeing my levels go up and my cash stack rise. Plus, the cow pits were always full of people, and a great place to socialize. My goal at the time was to get enough gold to purchase a full set of rune armor, which in this day and age isn't that impressive, but back then I thought it was. This time, however, as an Iron Man, and not being able to trade, there was no point in doing this, so I figured I'd get right into Al-Kharid and train up some fishing and cooking, so I could get some more food to train up my stats a bit more on goblins for my first main goal, and that was to get strong enough to train on Al-Kharid guards. For most, this might seem a bit silly, as there's way better ways to go about training combat, but Al-Kharid guards were my favorite spot to train up at a low level when I was younger. The reason behind this was that this was the first place that me and my best friend discovered that allowed multiple characters to attack the same enemy, so we would spend hours here together, talking and taking down these guards, rushing to help each other out if we pulled too many at once. Plus, we had that free cabbage over there on the table as well, which didn't help much, but was a nice free way to get some health back. So I started the grind. First I achieved 30 fishing and cooking, starting with shrimp in Al-Kharid, and then getting trout in Barbarian Village. I even ran into a pretty quirky clan during the process. By now though, I had the food needed to begin leveling my combat skills further, so I went about that process on goblins, and then on barbarians for a while as well, until I had reached level 15 in all 3 melee combat skills, which was when I decided it was time to knock off goal number 1 on the account, and head to Al-Kharid Palace, to continue on the leveling process by taking out Al-Kharid guards. Training here was incredibly nostalgic for me, and it really brought me back to my childhood. I started off here with a combat level of 19, and decided I'd keep grinding until 30, before heading to the Hill Giants in Edgeville Dungeon, as I had lots of fond memories in there as well, and it'd be nice to get some prayer levels to eventually unlock overheads. Then, around combat level 40, I'd like to hit the White Knights, as that was another area in which me and my friend would spend many hours training. So I spent the next few hours grinding out Al-Kharid guards until I was level 30, and decided it was time to move on from the desert. It was sad to leave, but I still had so much more to experience. By now, I was feeling a bit jaded with combat training, and I wanted something a bit more relaxing to mix up the grind, so I went back to my former favorite skill, and my first 99 in the game, woodcutting. I figured I'd chop my way around Lumbridge, soaking in the atmosphere, until I was finally high enough to chop down some willow trees in Draenor. I spent countless hours in Draenor as a kid, chatting away while woodcutting, or getting out the net for some fishing XP as well, so I very much looked forward to returning there. Plus, it'll be a good skill to AFK some gold with eventually in the future. But after a couple of hours of grinding, I had hit level 30 woodcutting, and was on my way to Draenor. I'd spent some time here, chatting with some fellow woodcutters, but eventually, it was time to get back to the combat grind, so I headed towards the Hill Giants in the Edgeville Dungeon. I decided I'd stay here until all my combat stats were level 30. In between food runs, figured I might as well run through the Stronghold of Security as well, for the better boots, plus some gold to splash out on some nifty new gear to speed up the leveling. And then, I got back to it and finished off the grind. Things moved pretty quick with the new gear, and before I knew it, I was 30 on all melee stats, and was sitting at an overall level of 36. But I was pleased with my progress so far after my first couple of days playing. I was sitting with these stats after 16 hours of gameplay. I know I could have probably become a member, done a couple of quests, and gotten all of this XP and levels in like 30 minutes, but I wanted to do it how I used to play, and I've had a blast so far with it. I'm playing this account as a nostalgia trip, instead of a speedrun to the endgame content. I still have lots of plans on what I want to do with this account though, and places I want to visit, but I don't want this section to go on forever, so I'll end it here, and move on to the third and final part of this video. Part 3. RuneScape Life Lessons. The Throughout this whole process of me returning to RuneScape and starting again on a fresh account, I had a lot of time to think about my previous 20 years with the game while I was leveling my skills, and it's made me realize how much joy this game has given me and how much I've learned from it. I truly believe that I learned more from this game than I did from my whole time in high school, and it's helped shape me into the person I am today. So I wanted to go over some of the memories I have of the game and how they taught me to be better in my day-to-day life. Starting with one of my earliest memories of the game, one that might not have seemed like a positive at the time, but ended up helping me out in the long run. And that was the first time I got scammed. I still remember it vividly to this day. I even remember the man's name, Mr. Lot of Cash, a name that should have raised a red flag off the bat, but being young and naive, I was too trusting for my own good. I was just hanging out over here in Lumbridge, chopping down trees, and this guy came up to me and started chatting. My account was far from anything special. I don't think I was even level 13 yet, nor did I have any good gear, but that didn't stop him. He was roughly 20 levels higher than me, so his name was in red, which meant he was significantly better at the game than I was, and he seemed like a nice enough guy. I don't remember what we were chatting about, but eventually he mentioned that he could get on my account whenever I was offline and level it up for me. I thought that was very nice of him, so I agreed, not questioning anything. And sure enough, the next day, when I tried to log into my account, it was gone. It hurt at the time, despite losing so little, but it ended up being a massive life lesson for me, one that I'm thankful for to this day. Mr. Lot of Cash taught me to always be careful and question everything. Admittedly, as the scams got more elaborate and the people got significantly better at doing them, I did fall victim to a couple more scams over my RuneScape career, but every time, I would learn from it and get better at spotting these kinds of people to avoid them in the future. I'm just glad I learned that lesson young, and with something like RuneScape accounts or RuneScape Gold, instead of getting scammed out of real money or possessions, which thankfully has yet to happen, maybe partly due to RuneScape scammers. A similar lesson was taught to me through the wilderness. I was never big into PKing, but I do remember the first time I got PK'd. I don't remember why, but I had to go to the wilderness for something, and I needed to do so with my gear on. I remember that feeling of nervousness as soon as I entered, as I was just trying to get in and out as fast as possible. I was constantly glancing over my minimap to make sure no one was near, when suddenly a dot appeared on it and my heart sank. The player was on me in an instant and kept freezing my character in place. I had no idea how to PK, and I knew I stood no chance, so I just began trying to reason with the guy, asking if he'd just let me pass through, but there was no reasoning with him, and he eventually finished me off. I even tried sending him a private message to see if he'd give me my gear back, but to no avail. Looking back, it wasn't really that big of a loss, maybe only a full set of black armor, but as a kid who didn't know how to make gold well, and that spent a lot of time trying to get that armor, I was devastated, and had to start gearing up again from scratch. But in the long run, I'm thankful for the experience, and I was taught many things that day. For starters, I learned that if you're going to take risks, you need to always be ready to accept the worst case scenario, and to never risk anything you can't afford to lose. I also learned to not rely on the kindness of others to get you by. It's better to expect the worst and be pleasantly surprised, than hope for the best and be left disappointed. But it wasn't all doom and gloom that I remember from my younger days. There were also lots of very positive memories and lessons that readied me to be successful later on in life. Like for example, one day, my best friend and I decided it was time we leveled up our gold making method from running cowhides, and decided a lobster business was the way to go. They were high in demand and selling for a good price as well. So we devised a plan. I would fish, and he would cook the lobsters and bank them, and then we would split the profits. We did this on Karamja at the time, because it was the only spot we knew of to do it. But we had a blast doing this, and started making way more gold than we used to before. Maybe it would have been more productive if we both fished and cooked and banked, but we had a blast doing it this way, and through this teamwork, our bond only strengthened, and eventually, we would take this partnership into the real world. For starters, when we were too young to work a real job, we'd cut all the coconuts down from the trees around our yards, and get some lemonade mix from the store down the road, and then sell coconut water and lemonade to cars driving by the house. We'd split everything we made, and although it wasn't crazy money, we made enough to pay for our memberships with it, and we thought of the idea while running our lobster business in RuneScape. Later on in life, in our early 20s, we even delivered a couple of sailboats together for clients across the ocean. The money doing that was significantly better than the lemonade stand, but I don't think our bond or our ability to work as a team efficiently would have ever been as good as it was without that first little business we set up in RuneScape, and the lemonade stand we brought into the real world. We still talk about it and the other RuneScape memories we've had together to this day. With the sailing skill coming to Old School soon, we might have to both jump back in and try it out together, and see how it compares to sailing in the real world. As I got older though, and the Grand Exchange was introduced to RuneScape, I started to learn about the in-game economy, and I learned a lot of lessons that I would end up applying to my everyday life as an adult. I joined what was referred to as a merchant clan in RuneScape, and this is when I started making serious gold. Basically, you'd buy a lot of items for a certain low price on the exchange, and then sell it for a higher price. Even if it's just a few gold extra, if you buy enough, you could stand to make really good profits, as long as you take into account taxes. It took me a while to get the hang of it, but eventually, I had it down, and was passively making tons of gold every day. I would take this into countless other MMOs I would play in the future, because this method is universal, and I would even eventually take it into real life as well, on the stock market. In my mid-20s, I started learning about and investing in the stock market. A lot of concepts I was taught came really easily to me due to what I learned in RuneScape. I think a large part of why I've been successful so far on the markets is because of what I was taught during my time in RuneScape. That's not to say I'm some kind of crazy day trader making millions of dollars. I'm a long-term investor, but just the practices of researching an item or a stock, finding something you like and believe is undervalued, purchasing it, and holding on to it until it reaches a value you think is fair to sell at, that whole process was just something I was already very familiar with due to RuneScape, and made it very easy for me to get into the stock market. Even before the Grand Exchange though, when we had to do bank sales, I learned a lot from them as well, on how to haggle with people, to find a happy medium for both parties, so everyone walks away from a deal happy. Buying and selling within RuneScape, and coming to understand its economy and the Grand Exchange, it all really helped set me up to be successful as an adult, and I think RuneScape did a better job at that than any school I went to. It also helped shape my mindset to be better prepared to be a success in the real world in a multitude of ways. For starters, just the basic task of goal setting and accomplishing said goals was built into me through RuneScape from a very young age, and enforced over and over, because that's basically what RuneScape is. From small tasks, like wanting a full set of rune armor, to the bigger tasks that would take me months to accomplish, like getting a skill cape, or even tasks like getting Barrow's gloves that could take up to a year. All of these tasks I would set for myself, and then slowly but surely grind my way towards them till I accomplished them, and then would push myself one step further. This is something vital in the real world if you're to maintain a job or build a career for yourself. Along with the grind, you're also taught how to multitask and always stay efficient. Like for example, if you have work to get done, you can throw RuneScape on the second monitor and do something super AFK while you're working, like woodcutting, to be knocking out 2 tasks at once. Or, if you want to be super efficient in RuneScape, there's those people who tick manipulate, and will be trading 2 skills at once, like crafting and agility, to make sure they're always ultra efficient. I never got into this, but I respect the level of efficiency they maintain. Just by doing this over and over throughout the years, it's made me so much more efficient in my day-to-day life, and better at multitasking as well. Plus it's gotten me through some really hard grinds in my life, like when I'd have to get a 10-page paper done, but I wanted to play RuneScape. I could just throw it up on the side, do some AFK skills, so I would still feel like I was playing, while still being productive and getting my work done. Heck, even right now as I'm writing this script, I'm fishing in Al-Kharid on the side on my new Iron Man. I just love how many AFK activities RuneScape has in it, so you can get a good balance of gaming and work done at the same time. Other games that require my full attention to play will sometimes see me getting sucked in, before I know it, the whole day will be gone, and I will have gotten nothing done. But possibly the most vital skill RuneScape has taught me is the ability to socialize at a high level. Growing up, I was always quiet and didn't talk much in school. I was pretty awkward, so I didn't say much. But when I was on RuneScape, I could talk to all kinds of people from all over the world and learn how other people act and react to what I did and said. I slowly got better at conversing with others, and eventually got the confidence to put what I learned into practice in the real world, and I started making so many more friends, and tons more opportunities opened up for me because of it. I used these social skills that I built in RuneScape pretty much every job I had to date, including my time as a bartender, where I needed to socialize with customers and my tips depended on it. Plus, I learned how to type incredibly fast due to how much typing I was doing on RuneScape, which is a very handy skill to have as well. There's just so many things that I learned from RuneScape over the past 20 years that have significantly improved my life, that I could keep going on for another hour, but I'll call it there so the video doesn't go on forever. But I'd really love to hear from you guys in the comments below. How long have you been playing RuneScape? And what's the biggest and best lesson you've taken away from the game? If there's enough interest, maybe I'll make a follow-up video with all of your comments on the 10 best life lessons RuneScape teaches its player base. Or I can do an update on how my Iron Man is coming along. I truly believe I've learned as much or more from RuneScape than I have from any school I attended. But if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps out massively. But until next time, have a good one. Thanks for watching another video. If you'd like to see me check out Guild Wars 2, click on the video to the left. Or if you'd like to get my thoughts on New World, a game that has a lot of similar features to RuneScape, click on the video to the right. And a massive shout out to all the channel members and patrons who help support the channel, seen on screen now. Links on how to become one in the video description below.